All right, thank you for taking time to listen to and check out this video here. We're just going to take a few minutes. My name is Jason Vidaurri. I'm co-host here at 73 Mentors. And also with me is my brother.
Another co-host, Vincent and Jason Vidaurri.
And we're just going to take a few minutes here, introduce ourselves a little bit, let you know a little bit of our background, and really talk about the podcast. And for you, the listener, giving you an idea what you can expect from 73 Mentors. And I guess first I'll just give a little background on myself. Like I said, my name is Jason. I've been podcasting for about nearly 2 years now. And as part of that journey, has been trying to identify things that would be more valuable for an audience. And my background is in chemical engineering, so I spent a lot of time looking at data, analyzing data, trying to break things down to find out what's most important. And that comes into play, as we'll explain here on 73 Mentors and what we're trying to accomplish here. Vince, why don't you go and give you a little bit of your background, who you are, and then we'll describe the podcast.
Sure. As Jason said, my name's Vincent. I'm Jason's brother, older brother. And,
Hey.
and my background is in pharmacy. I've been a pharmacist for over 20 years. And similar to Jason, though, being analytical, spending a lot of time analyzing stuff, analyzing data that's fairly difficult to comprehend for the most part, and then bringing it in addition to this analyzing it, I've been teaching for about 20 years too, to different individuals, either to individual patients, to doctors, general public. And so those two skill sets, analyzing stuff and then bringing it into a format in a manner that allows the audience or the listener to understand really complex issues. And also not only that, but also some practical tips. And that's kind of where we're going with 73 Mentors.
Yeah, and I guess along those same lines, I've always been, I guess, a student to some degree in trying to figure out better ways to live. I've found that through my own faith path and also, I guess, just through investigation. And one thing I think I've constantly done that plays into this is like you said, similar to you, Vince, where I've often tried to figure out what's relevant, what's not relevant, and bring those things to surface and be able to explain them and teach them to people. And so I guess maybe I'll hit the origin story here on 73 Mentors and where this came about and what we're trying to do. So some time ago, several months ago, in research, looking at different topics for my other podcast, it's called Story Hinge, and Vince has joined me on that podcast several times as well. And in that, I came across a book called The 100 Most Influential People Who Ever Lived. And that really intrigued me. I thought, because throughout this time, as I've been doing the other podcasts, and Vince and I have been having conversations pretty much weekly about the podcast, but just about life in general. And this, looking at that 100 most influential people who ever lived, was an intriguing thing because we've talked about some of these individuals, and we've heard about these individuals, and many of you out there have heard of this as well. And so then we started discussing that idea. Well, what if we start talking about these influential people who have lived out of all time, who are the most influential of all time? If we start talking about them and researching them and finding out what made them influential and really trying to bring that to today and to our lives and trying to find the value in that. That was some of the beginnings of this part. Does you have any other parts you want to hit on that?
Yeah, so I think some other things I'd like to add there is that not only the individuals, so we go biographically, where did they grow up? Who did they grow up with? What were their parents like? What was the time period? What was the culture they grew up in? I think that all that's important, and also the works that these individuals did. I think some of the works that we're going to go through are fascinating in and of themselves. I think most people, with any degree, have ideas about the individual, maybe recognize the names, but not necessarily look at the works, or maybe be somewhat familiar with some of their works, but not in depth. So Jason and I are going to bring our analytical skill set, if you will, to that and look at the works in depth and then bring it to the surface and teach it that way for practical manners. I think the other thing that we'd like to do is the audience that we have in mind is someone who may not have the time for some of these works, may not have the time to really delve into these issues, and Jason and I are using our time to do that and to bring some very, I think, practical takeaways that are life transforming in some respect, because these are the best of the best. The reason we call it 73 mentors is these, in a sense, function as surrogate mentors or as mentors, and to just see how they conducted their lives and what they did throughout their lives. I think it will be very informative and very educational.
Yeah, and the idea of a mentor is I think a powerful one that we're trying to bring forth, because you may have heard that you are the sum of the 5 most influential people in your life. And I know for a lot of us out there, perhaps we don't have those great influences in our life, or maybe weren't raised that way. Maybe we don't have that. And so, to somewhat vicariously, we're going to use or look at these historical influential people and bring them into our lives as mentors. And I think that'll be really powerful, because we see that in our day, looking to current day living people as mentors and trying to follow their examples. And that's powerful enough in its own. But I think this is even more powerful in terms of, hey, these are the most influential who have ever lived, and they've impacted our world in many ways, and probably in many ways we don't even realize it, that as we start going into some of these individuals. And so that's some of the, I guess, a little bit of why the podcast, a little bit of the background of it, and
a little bit. So 73 mentors, we're going to go through 73 mentors. We're going to start with number 22, which is Plato, and then from Plato we'll count down from 22 to 1. As we start approaching the top 10 to top 5, we're going to ask our audience to start picking the other individuals that they'd like us to review. Part of the structure too is that we don't dedicate an equal amount of time to each individual. We'll dedicate what's necessary, and so this is not a quick study. We're not looking for a large breadth without any depth. We're looking for both. We're looking for breadth and depth, because I think at that point nothing worthwhile comes about very shortly. So we're going to go in depth about a lot of these works and these individuals, and as we go through them, you're going to see multiple traits, if you will, that continue to rise again and again and again. That's kind of the structure that's the structure that we're approaching it with.
Yeah, and I think a good example, at the time of this recording, we're actually closing up on Plato, which is our number 22. And in that we were spending, I guess, close to 3 months really spending time with Plato in terms of reading and researching, and we'll have put in probably over 15 hours talking about Plato. So that's the kind of depth you might imagine with some of these. And like you said, Ben, sometimes it probably won't go that long. Other these individuals will be shorter than that. There may be others that go longer. And I think that's pretty important, that we're putting a pretty significant amount of time so that you don't have to. It's really the part of it, but you're still going to get breadth and depth on each one of these individuals.
Yeah, and I think it saves you time, but also if you want to read some of the works that we're going to go through, this gives you some background in order to get into those works. And as Jason mentioned right at the beginning, is that one of the things we want to do is provide those mentor ideas to you that you may not ever been exposed to. Even someone who's gone to college, Jason and I both gone to college and spent a lot of time there. Some of these ideas we've not even been introduced to. So it's one of those situations where I think our educational system is really not set up to take this much time and go into this much depth. Oftentimes you'll read sections. Even when we read Plato, I took Plato as a philosophy class in college, and we've spent maybe 2 or 3 hours on Plato entirely. So again, it was very shallow, or not really in depth in completion of an in-depth discussion about his work. So again, we'll continue to bring fresh ideas in each individual, fresh ideas, but at the same time meld them together with other people that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think another thing we're going to be attempting to do is bringing real life tools out of this study, and things that you can really apply, maybe some rules of life that you can live by, pieces of wisdom that you can incorporate into your life, and so I guess I have to ask sometimes that question, well, then who is this podcast for? Who would really benefit from this? And I think we're hitting it somewhat in our discussion already, but maybe we should flesh that out a little bit more. And I think it's for someone who wants to gain more wisdom and learn from the best of the best, like you said, Vince. And maybe doesn't have that time or that energy to do this work themselves. We're going to do a lot of that, but you're still going to get a lot of value from what we do.
I think that's so. Who's our audience? I think we touched on it a little bit. I think someone who is looking to have a historical perspective to some degree is looking for an education, not an education like a formal schooling education, but education that has built into it a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight. I think there's going to be one of our mottos is cultivating a culture, or cultivating a consciousness of wisdom, wit, and zeal. Meaning you have to turn these things over and allow them to marinate a little bit to get some wisdom. And wit is that you're able to see these things more keenly. And there should be some enthusiasm. Both Jason and I, there's some enthusiasm going through these, that some of the quotes and the ideas that come through, you can't help but, I think, get a little bit excited. So again, it's for the individual who gets excited about really in-depth discussions that talking about, we talk about the soul, about immortality, about how to live a good life, how to live a just life, but not in your bumper sticker type manner. These are discussions that will take time and a lot of thought.
Yeah, I guess along with that, I would say that there's some challenging ideas too. For me already, there's new ideas I've had to wrestle with Plato with and disagree with him at times. I think he's wrong on a few things, and but I think that's important, because to stretch our minds, to stretch the possibility, we have to grapple with some of those things. I think to really be able to work through them and to examine them and find value. Or not find value. Sometimes I think we'll play with ideas and we'll hold them there and examine them for a while, and then we'll say, you know what, I don't find anything here, and we might move on from that idea. But I think we at least approach it with an openness first and say, well, let's examine it and see it and turn it around and examine this and see where it goes. So I think that's an invitation for. Really, I think our invitation really is for you out there to join us on this journey, because I think for both you and me, Vince, it's going to be a huge learning process. It already has been.
Yeah.
And we've only been a few months into this.
And I think the invitation too, I think, would also include anyone who's curious. Anyone who's curious about how the world got to where it's at. Because all the individuals we're going to talk about are formations of every culture in the world. To give you some examples, besides Plato, we're going to talk about Marx. We're going to talk about Galileo. We're going to hit on pretty much every major religion, whether that's Judaism, Christianity, some of the Eastern religions. We're going to talk about Islam. So we're going to hit on some of really deep topics. But again, if anyone's curious on how we got to where we are, I think we'll definitely touch on pretty much every aspect of culture as we now have it.
Yeah. Religious, there'll be scientists in there. We have... I guess I'm just hitting some of our top 22 that we already laid out. We have, in terms of scientists, we got Darwin, Pasteur, Einstein. Then you have Newton is another one. Then you have these multiple characters that hit multiple places. Oh, Euclid's another mathematician. Aristotle will be hitting, and some of the arts as well will be in that as well, like
Shakespeare.
And Da Vinci is another one. So, for me, I'm familiar with these names, but how much depth do I know about them? Not too much on most of them. And that's probably similar to many of you out there. Like, yeah, I know this, and I may know a little bit about this person. Oh, I heard of that person, but I don't know too much. Well, this is an opportunity to learn deeply about them. So I guess we'll close with just that, with the invitation to join us, and we'll keep adding value in multiple ways through diving into these 73 mentors.